Hey everyone, how's it going? So in this video I'm going to be showing you how to replace your burnout incandescent bulbs in the climate controls in my 2008 Grand Prix. This applies to all of the Grand Prix that have the dual zone digital climate controls. I'm going to be replacing these with red and blue LEDs. So in order to get the center console out, you're going to need to move this trim piece out of the way, as well as this storage compartment. It's really easy to do. Just reach up underneath the storage compartment here, and then pull towards you, okay? In this corner, put your thumb over your keyhole cover, pull out some more, okay? Now that'll release this, and it also may release this at the same time. And then you just kind of go around like that, pulling towards you, and then you don't even need to disconnect any of the harnesses that are back there. All you have to do is set it aside just like that. It'll stay exactly where it's at, of course, depending on if you have an aftermarket radio or not. And then you'll notice that there are Phillips head screws right here. The way this is set up is if you say you want to get rid of the radio, you have to take this and this out. Fortunately, all we need to do is get rid of this storage compartment that's at the bottom. So you have two Phillips head screws that are here on the left and the right. Remove those, and this compartment should come right out. Alrighty, with the four screws out, you can go ahead and bring this down a little bit. You don't even have to remove it. You don't have to bring the shifter knob back. All you have to do is bring it down a little bit. Then grab a hold of your climate controls, pull them away. And you'll notice on the back here, you've got two harnesses. They're very easy to get out, especially the blue one. You just take it right here and you squeeze it. That will release this, and I'll probably have to do this with two hands. Anyway, I'll do it with two hands. But anyway, you release that, bring it back. This one here may be a little bit more difficult because you might have to get a flathead screwdriver and bring it up underneath that point right there to lift up this tab here, this clip side, and then you can go ahead and pull it out from there. Alrighty, so here's the climate controls, and the first thing that we need to do to get this open is we need to take off these two knobs. It's very easy to break these things when you're getting them off, so just make sure you're as careful as you possibly can be. Take your time. There's nothing wrong with taking your time to get these off. But basically, what I like to do is move the dial to the auto position here on the left, and there's a little spot right here where you don't have any of that that rubber that they put on here to make it smoother. Go ahead and take your flat blade screwdriver, bring it down in there if you can, and just bring it up a little bit. Again, be as gentle as possible when you're doing this step, because there's a good possibility that you could just break this off. So what I like to do is I like to try to lift up on it at the same time to give it some upward pressure, but just bring it up, move it, kind of move the control if you can, and you should see it start to pop up slowly. Again, this is going to take time, so don't rush it. Don't think that you have to have this off immediately. And once you've done that, do the same thing for this one. Just kind of move the controls around while you wedge your screwdriver in there, and then it should pop right out. Alright, so I've removed both of the knobs here, and interestingly enough, these knobs are identical on the non-electronically controlled units. So now that we have the two knobs off, we need to get at the four screws that are on the back. There's one at each corner. It's a really strange 4.5 millimeter size. You can get away with using a 5, but if you have a 4.5, that's even better. And again, it's a really strange size, but go ahead and remove all four of those. Okay, so I've got all 4 of the screws out, so now we can go ahead and separate the pieces. Just gently lift up on the back side, and there's a circuit board that's underneath here. You lift up on that circuit board as well, and that should bring this apart. Okay, so here's the top side. This is actually where you push the buttons and so on. So anyway, we'll set that aside. So here's the actual circuit board that we're going to be modifying, removing the incandescent bulbs. I'll see if I can get real close here on focus. So you've got an incandescent bulb here, there's one here, you got another here, here, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 of the smaller type incandescent bulbs. Then at the same time you also have blue sleeves right here and right there. That gives you your down temperature or your colder temperature look. So this lights up blue, this lights up blue. So you're going to need some blue LEDs as well as the red. So let's go ahead and start removing the old incandescent bulbs. Alright, so what we need to do is we need to find on the back side of the board where each of these incandescent bulbs is actually attached to the board. So it's just one of those things where you find the bulb and then you just kind of move it to the opposite side, and I can see by looking at it that it's these two that are right here, okay? It's extremely difficult to show you on this circuit board where they're all at, and you also have smaller incandescent bulbs that are up here. You just got to kind of look at it and see exactly where they're at. These up here are a lot easier to see because they have this black plastic strip that's right here, and they use a lot of solder for those for some reason. So just kind of flip the board over, look to see where it's at, and just kind of trace it. So there's one right here, and then you've got another here and here. So you find it on the other side. And then you've got the 2 blue ones that are at the end. We're actually going to be dealing with those last to make sure we don't get those mixed up. And these are easy. You won't get any of these mixed up. I don't think I have to say that you can burn yourself and you can damage the board, so make sure you know what you're doing. I'd hate for you to damage this because you didn't know what you're doing. So if you don't know how to solder or not very good at it, find somebody who does. Otherwise, you could destroy the board or burn yourself or even burn your house down. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the incandescent bulbs right now. Alright, so I want to give you a closer look at these. These really strange socket incandescent bulbs that are up here at the top. They're actually just as easy to get out. What I highly recommend you do is you actually get one of these things here and you suck out some of the solder. So you heat up one point right here, get rid of some solder, heat up this point, get rid of some solder. It just makes it easier because they put a lot of solder there for some reason. So you just basically, while you're heating those up, you just kind of use your finger and you push towards the circuit board, and when you heat up one end, it should release one end while you're pushing towards you, and then you heat up the other and it should release the other. Now here in the middle, you're going to have to pull back this foam here in order to get access to the solder that's on this side. They use a sticky back, so pull that foam back and that'll give you access to that side of the solder, and then you can go ahead and remove that. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about what is required to make this conversion. You're going to need an LED. You're going to need a 5mm flat top wide angle LED. The reason is because you want to be able to mimic the behavior of an incandescent bulb. So you've got your incandescent here, okay, and it shoots light in all different directions. Most LEDs, they only shoot light to the top. So you need a wide angle LED, so this will shoot light in all different directions to help light the switch, okay? And this one's a red one, and then I have blue ones here. These blue ones are 3mm, okay? So they're slightly smaller, but they're 3mm, and they're also wide. So I have blue and I have red, okay? Again, you need to make sure that you get the ones that actually are wide. I'm also using a 620 ohm 1 watt flame-proof resistor, okay? Now, the resistor is there because these LEDs can only handle about 3.5 volts of electricity. So if you were to take the 12 volts from your car, 12 to 15 volts approximately, and put that through this LED, it would burn up instantly. The incandescent bulbs can handle that voltage. They can handle 12 to 15 volts. These LEDs cannot. So you need a resistor to step down the voltage to make it safe. So what you do is you make sure that the resistor is on the positive leg of the LED. Now in this case the positive leg is the longer leg. So you've got your resistor that's soldered to the positive end, and then you bring the positive end of the resistor to the positive end on the board. Then you just solder your negative end to the board, directly to the board, and that'll make your connection. So it's super important. Now these are, as I said, 1 watt resistors. The reason that they're a watt is because they'll handle up to 24 volts before burning up. So these things can get hot, and because they're in such a confined space, I wanted to be absolutely sure that nothing actually caught fire or burned up or the board burned up or whatever. That's why I'm using 1 watt. I'm guessing that you can probably use a half watt, but to be on the safe side, I'm using a watt, and that should be plenty to keep these nice and cool. Okay, so LEDs are polarity sensitive, which means you have to find out what's positive and you have to find out what's negative on the board. If you were to reverse the two, the LED is just not going to light up. So, being that I've done this several times, I already know that the positive illumination is on the left terminal and the negative illumination is on the right terminal. And then for these here, these different ones that are up top, okay, I'm looking at the board reversed, but the positive is the top terminal and the negative is the bottom terminal. So you would actually flip this around like that. So top is positive, negative is the bottom one. That's super important, and you do that. So you're going to be soldering the resistor directly to the board on the left terminal or the top terminal here on these here, okay? So we're going to go ahead and get our resistors soldered in, and what I'm going to do is, like I do every time, I'm actually going to tuck the resistor underneath the LED. Okay, so it's just going to be tucked underneath the LED, and it's going to occupy the space here where the incandescent bulb did before to make it as compact as possible. Alrighty, so you can see where I've actually done some trim work on the resistor, and that's to punch it through. You can see where it's kind of coming through on the other side there. So that's to give it enough length so that I can flatten out this resistor. Okay, I went ahead and flattened out the resistor, and that's what it looks like right there. So it's flat against the board. You can see I've got the positive end. It's already soldered from the other side, and it just kind of wraps around and sits flat. So now I need to get my LED, and I need to solder the negative lead to the board, and then solder the positive lead of the LED to the resistor. Alright, so I've completed the first one, and this actually lights up the heated seats as well as the up temperature on the driver's side. You need to make sure that this resistor is up and down, okay? And the reason is because it's going to be fitting in between this spot right here, and you can see where the buttons will actually bump up against this portion here if this isn't up and down. So I actually already tested it. I put this back on here and it did not interfere with the functions of the button. So just make sure that it's up and down as much as possible. It's not going to be perfect, but there's enough room in here for this resistor and LED to slide in there. So now we can do the same thing for the passenger side. Okay, so now we need to turn our attention to the two incandescents that actually light up your bottom switches. Now, these two on here are really easy to fit a resistor in. There's plenty of room. However, if you look right here, you can see that the resistor will not actually fit in here, okay? It's too long. So what we actually need to do is we need to modify this, okay? What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be removing these switches here, and I'm going to be using a Dremel, and I'm going to trim down this portion right here, just this bottom. You got this little, what, plus sign or something like that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to trim that. That way, this resistor will actually fit in there just fine. I mean, it'll barely, it's just a millimeter or so too long to fit in there. So this is actually going to require some modification. Now be careful not to modify it too much or trim too much off, because it could actually prevent these buttons from being guided up and down properly, okay? So we don't even need to go all the way down. We just need to trim probably, I don't know, maybe 1/10 of an inch or so, just enough so that when the circuit board is going to be flush with this, the resistor will be able to fit in there. And the LED is going to be sitting on the top just as before, so there should be plenty of room in there after I've done the trim work. Okay, so if you're wondering how to get these buttons out, you can see when I push on this button, there's a little stop that's right here. Just take a flat blade screwdriver and push in on that. Okay, so you should be able to see the trim work. You know, I gotta clean this up a little bit. There's some pieces that are still hanging off of there, but you can see where I've done the trim work, and you can see I didn't go too far down. Maybe that's a better side view right there. So I just took this out, and what that's going to allow us to do is be able to get or fit a resistor down in here. There's enough room now where we don't have to worry about it getting caught up, because the important thing is to make sure the buttons still function. They need to function, otherwise there's no point in doing this. So we had to make some room for it, and the buttons should still work just fine. So they slap in there. They're not flopping around or anything. They're just fine. So we know that we're not going to have any problems there. But yeah, it looks pretty good, I think. Alrighty, so you can see that I've went ahead and soldered the bottom two here. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to focus in on this. Maybe I can. Okay, there we go. So if you look, you'll see there is a solder point right there. Now, I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. It really doesn't matter. But what's important is that you keep this resistor away from that point here. You don't want these two to cross, because this resistor at this terminal is actually coming from the positive illumination. So I'm not really sure what this goes to. It may be a ground. It may just be a positive. It doesn't really matter. Again, you want to make sure that this doesn't touch there. So just be mindful of that. You can see I've got both of these resistors tucked up underneath here, really nice and tight, and the LED, just like these here, the LED is sitting right on top, and I have it tucked in. Again, you want it going up and down because we made space so that this LED as well as the resistor could fit in between here, and you can see how I've soldered it in. The positive terminal of the LED is going this way, and it's just soldered in right here to the positive end of the resistor for both sides, okay? So, you know, it may take a little bit of figuring out exactly how you're going to want yours. Alright, so this is why you test the buttons, to make sure they work. So as it turns out, see if I can get a little bit better focus. As it turns out, that little end right there that's sticking off of the end of the LED, that right there is actually interfering with the AC button. So all I'm going to do is just trim that off, but it's just good to make sure that you're checking these LEDs and their fitment to make sure that they're working. So you can see I have a little bit too much solder hanging off the end, so I'm going to go ahead and trim that off, and then it should fit. Okay, so we still have those little black bulbs that were up here. We still have to get those, and I already soldered one of them. So you can see the LED is flush with the board, and that's because I was able to put the resistor on the back side. There's so much room in between these two circuit boards here. Just mount the resistor on the underside. Keep in mind that the top, if you're looking at it like this, okay, looking at it like this, the top is positive. So the top terminal is positive. So if we flip the board over, the bottom becomes the positive. So you can see if I can really get zoomed in here, focused in. So you can see that I have the resistor soldered to the top post, which is the one at the bottom there because we're reversed, and that runs to the positive leg of the LED, which the negative leg runs from the LED to the negative side of the terminal, which is this one on the top here, okay? So that's how it's wired in. Very simple and much easier than doing the other ones because you can hide the resistor underneath here without any problems. So now we can go ahead and repeat that process for the remaining 3. Alright, so hopefully you can see what I've done. So I've got all of the resistors to the top post, which you can see here. All the resistors are wired in, and you can see where I've routed them around here to try to stay away from, or keep the LED away from that top post, because if this touches that by accident, I mean, it's not going to do anything except for burn up the LED because it'll be bypassing the resistor. So I wanted to make sure that I brought the resistor back this way and around, so that it's out of the way. You might be able to see, try to get focused. There's plenty of room between the negative post and the resistor, so I'm not worried about that. Just make sure that you spend some time and you look at this and see that it's routed properly, that it's not going to accidentally touch any other terminals that are in the area. Just be really, really careful about that. This one here was the most difficult because of these pads here. These pads, I'm assuming, help prevent the 2 boards from actually touching. But there's so much room between the 2, I'm not really quite sure what their purpose is. But they're there anyway, so I'm leaving them there. So I had to bring this back a little bit, and this was a little bit more difficult to solder. But I was able to get it. You can see the positive, and then it's wrapping around here. It's far enough off the board. There's plenty enough space where it's not going to touch any other terminals. And then just brought it back to the positive end here. And there's plenty of space between the negative terminal on the board and the positive on the resistor. So, just look at it real close, real careful. Make sure that it's not going to be touching anything. And you should be fine. And then obviously the LEDs are flush with the board itself. So before I go any further, there's only 2 more LEDs I need to get installed. That's the blue ones here. I purposely left those to make sure I didn't get them mixed up. Okay, so I want to show you exactly where I put these resistors to make room. You can see this one right here is kind of sideways like this. And it does butt up against the edge of the circuit board, but that's fine. There's plenty of room. And then, of course, I have the LED standing straight up from where the incandescent was. And I already tested this. It fits just fine. So it looks really good and functions just fine. And then for the other blue one over here, I had to go up and down. So go vertical with it. And the reason is because, as I stated before, there's actually plenty of vertical room right there. See that empty space there in the middle? That's where everything goes. There's plenty of room. And then on this side, you don't have that much room. You actually have to fit it in between this spot here. So just make sure that the one on the right here is vertical, okay? And you got plenty of room, so you don't have to worry about making it too tight. And then this one here is more of horizontal. You want to make sure you clear this post here. At the same time, you want to be careful because there's also a terminal right here that you want to make sure that you don't touch by accident. There's another one under here that you don't want to touch by accident. So bring up the resistor wire to the middle here to make sure that doesn't touch. And then, of course, you don't want to. You've got plenty of area up here where you're not going to run into any terminals, so long as you bring the wire upward. So now that that's done, we can get it outside into the car and make sure that all the lamps actually function just fine. Alrighty, so we are in the car right now, and I have the circuit board all out and exposed. This is just a test, so do at your own risk. But I want to make sure that all the lamps actually work before I go ahead and put everything all back together. So we're going to go ahead and turn our parking lamps on. And there you go. So it looks great. All the lamps are working, okay? All the LEDs are bright. They are lit up. It looks really good. The camera's washing out the colors, but they're much darker red here, and this blue here is a very nice dark blue. Definitely, it just looks great. I don't know if I can try to bring my exposure down a little bit. This might help a little bit to kind of see what's going on here. So I brought the exposure down, and yeah, they just look really good, and they're very bright. Alright, so with verification that everything is working just fine, we can go ahead and start putting this back together. And it's, it's fairly easy to do. You just kind of bring it together. Go slow and easy. You want to make sure you don't damage anything. It should fall into place just fine, like so. And you just kind of sandwich it together. Now, if you have any problems where something's hanging up or this doesn't flatten out, you can see it's nice and flat. If you have any problems there, then you know that you've got a resistor or an LED that's in the way. Now, you can see mine is plenty flat, and it's also plenty flat up top. I know I can't really show you because the circuit board the ribbons are in the way, but it's plenty flat on top, trust me. And then just close it down, okay, like this. Close it down, and then obviously sandwich it together again, like that. Alright, now holding it together, make sure it's completely together. You want to double check that all your buttons work just fine. So no hang-ups there. Do the same here. Okay, check all the buttons. I don't have any hang-ups at all, so now everything works just fine. So now we can go ahead and get the 4.5 millimeter, the 4 of them, back in. Okay, so with all 4 of the 4.5 millimeters back in, we can go ahead and put our knobs back on. So this is fairly easy to do. There's a half notch here where it lines up with this notch. It doesn't matter which knob goes where, they're actually identical. But just line that notch up if you can. Actually, what I like to do is bring it straight up so the flat part is on the top. Then you just line the flat part up here. Okay, and then you gently push down, applying force straight in the middle, right in the middle. Don't bend it or anything. You don't want to break that. So this button works, or this knob works just fine. Do the same thing for the zones. Just set it on, push down in the middle. It should lock into place. And now we're done. So the last thing we need to do before we finish this project, we need to get it out to the car and verify that all of the functions on here work just fine. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Alright, so getting everything all put back together is actually fairly easy to do. There's the 2 wire harnesses that are in the back here. They are not interchangeable, so the blue one goes on the left side, okay, and then the green one goes on the right side. So you can go ahead and plug those in. Okay, so here we are back in the car, and we're going to go ahead and give it a start. Alright, so far everything looks good. I heard the AC come on. We'll go ahead and try everything manually. Basically, go through the entire control scheme, turning all of everything, making sure that everything works just fine. These controls work just fine. Passengers working just fine. I'll assume that the heated leather seats are working just fine. So, looks like everything's working great. So now all we have to do is screw everything back in and we'll be finished. And yes, they look really, really good. They really do. Okay, so once you have your harnesses plugged in, it's as simple as sliding it in. There's actually a couple of notches here that line up with those holes that are right there. Just line it up. It's easier if you have two hands to do this. Just line it up and then you can start bringing the screws in. Alrighty, so with the two screws in, everything is lined up properly. Now we can go ahead and do the exact same thing with the storage box. And again, it slides in just like that, and then you take your two screws and put them in. Alrighty, both sets of screws are in now. Now all we need to do is replace the outer housing, the center console, the outer housing to the dash. And you just kind of push it in very easily like that. Then go ahead and replace the ignition. We have completed this project, so we are done. If you have any questions, of course, you can let me know, and take care.